Yo, what's up guys, and welcome back to another Dark Souls Battle Simulator video. I have some insane matches for you today between Midir, the immortal dragon raised by gods, and Gael, the slave knight who will stop at nothing to secure the Dark Soul. Before we jump into it, these matches were so incredibly close that I didn't even have to adjust anyone's HP to make it a fair fight. This doesn't even really surprise me though, since these two are some of the last bosses you fight in Dark Souls 3, and they're also some of the hardest. As always, the goal of this video is to answer the following question. If these two enemies were to ever actually fight, then who would win? To do so, I've simulated 100 of these battles, and today we'll be analyzing the best ones from that collection. At the end of the video, we'll go ahead and review why the winner won using data I pulled from the game's files. In fact, the scores you're seeing now are my interpretation of that data and all of the battles that I ended up watching. Without any further ado, let's begin. Midir was probably the toughest foe Gael's fought so far, and yes, that includes you. Don't be fooled by the win count, as most battles came down to the wire, with only a few hundred HP remaining on both sides. Let's start with some of the Slave Knight's advantages in this fight. Interestingly, Gael is actually the only enemy in the game who can change their type mid-fight. And it's when he transitions into a second phase, he becomes hollow and gains an enormous resistance to dark, basically doubling it. This meant that Midir needed to make sure to hold off going into his second phase for as long as possible, because once he did, then Gael became very resistant to two of Midir's most powerful attacks, the focused Dark Beam and Mass Affinity. While Midir's attacks were monstrous, and on average he was able to deal more damage than Gael could, landing those attacks was another story, because as we all know, Gael is an expert at flying through the air and dodging attacks. Speaking of flying, while Midir had the advantage in range because he literally could fly, he couldn't fly forever. Once he landed, Gael could use his crossbow to get some headshots in, but he needed to be careful, because fighting Midir at range is one of the most dangerous things you could do, and pretty much guarantees that he'll do some of his most devastating attacks, like the dash, Dark Beam, and Aerial Fire Breath. Oh yeah, and one crazy thing that actually happened while I was recording these fights was that Midir powered up twice, like back to back. I've never actually seen him do that before. Maybe he was really mad because Gael hit him too hard or something, I don't really know. Midir is capable of doing standard, fire, and dark type damage, none of which Gael are particularly weak to. But Midir made up for this in other ways. He was actually able to break through Gael's poise and interrupt him during the startup frames of some of his attacks, therefore lowering his damage output a bit. The Darkeater has a lot of ways of getting around an enemy's defenses, but when it came to Gael, things were different. You see, Gael is unable to be grabbed or knocked down for that matter, which made it easier for him to close the distance and take the fight to Midir. Once he was up close, his very huge, powerful attacks made it really easy to hit Midir's head, which doubled all of his damage. In the end, it really came down to Gael's mobility and darkness absorption, as these greatly increased the likelihood that he would outlast Midir. This match goes to Gael. And yeah, that pretty much sums up the fight. Thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. Yo.